Good afternoon, everyone. Jane Ross, and thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, everyone, for being here and for joining us in this absolutely amazing journey of patient-oriented research and getting patients involved in research. And it's not every day that one gets opportunity to tell one's story, and it's certainly not every day that I get asked to tell my story, but that's exactly what I was asked to do today, is tell my story from the patient perspective of what it's like to be involved in this unit or on these units. And I will try to touch on the how, when, where, how, why, and what from my perspective to the best I can within this little bit of time that we have here together. And I want you to know at the outset that everything that these professional people have said about the impetus and the diligence and the care with which we have learned to work together is really true. And I have said out in my area, and no, I'm not talking about Banff or Jasper or Edmonton or Calgary, my area is rural. And I like to say I'm rural and cosmopolitan in that order. So, and I don't have any of these things, pictures of little guys sitting on piers or whatever, or rocks, but you're going to have to use your imagination. I know that Marilyn likes stories, and so you're going to be part of this story thing. So if you would imagine with me my setting, I will tell you just, first of all, where I work and do this patient stuff that I try to do, which is becoming easier as we learn to apply these people have talked about. So my area is Battle River Rural. Imagine Battle Lake west of Pigeon Lake. Do you know where it is, anybody? All the way to the border and to Battleford. So a nice plain, rivers, a river runs through, highways run through, indigenous communities, settler communities, and all the other new immigrants that work and live within that area. So, no, it's not every day I get asked to tell my story, and as you heard in the introduction to me, I did have a background in research, and I still continue to do it in my own way. But I want you to know that when I was a young health professional in the early 60s, I was really believing that the knowledge of patients and where they were coming from, who they were, their backgrounds, was really the way to go about things. I felt that in my heart. I felt that it was the way to be effective, the way to provide better care, the way to obtain better results. And at that time, we didn't talk about results orientation. We didn't talk about outcomes analysis, things like that. But in my brain, and in my experience, that's the way I was made, and that's the way I thought was the logical way to go. And if any of you are as aged as I am, you will know that in the 60s, it wasn't so easy, was it? You started talking that way, and sometimes you got the resistance movement. And I thought, and I'm asking you this question, have you ever considered or found yourself in a position where your own logic is not the shared logic in the room or in the system or whatever? Well, I've had lots of that in my experience, both as a patient and as a researcher and as a teacher and whatever else I've done. But in the context of this conference, what I hope to do for Diane, who asked me to do this, and with you, is to explore a little bit of being the patient and get a little bit up close and personal to what that has meant in my life without going into the whole shebang of it, and to indicate how what Lisa and Marilyn and Tim and all of those who are doing the certifications and so on, why it's so important what they're doing. As a young professional, and also later on, I often observed that the health research that was done seemed distant, seemed remote, and often within the domain of a select few. And although my mind was very curious and really wanted to be engaged, finding the support for that kind of approach wasn't so readily available. And that's why I am so very thankful to the precursor of Alberta Innovates, Alberta Heritage Foundation for Medical Research, the director at that time, Dr. Lionel McLeod, who listened to my little story and how I wanted to do things and how I wanted to do research. And he said that he would support me within that organization to do my doctorate, which was a wonderful thing. And when I came back, he said to me, and I was a new doctorate holder, he said, well, Jane, now that you've studied this stuff, what would you do if we gave you $3 million to start implementing it? And I really didn't know the answer to that. But I did hitch myself to a wagon or two of people with like-mindedness, and we started to, I think it makes some difference. Earlier on, we didn't have the advent of plain language, and the international plain language movement started right here in Edmonton, just across the river, with Christine Mowat. And that's one of the things I've seen as a patient, as we've worked together, that we are starting to shun the stuff that's remote and not very communicative. And I'm really happy to see that some of the journal publications now are starting to have a plain language summary, and I hope I can refer to that a bit later on. And the thing that was the most troubling to me, and I think that 2019, for some of you, may not be so different, sometimes I felt that research was being done more for the benefit of the research team and their career development than for patients, thereby passing crucial knowledge and indicators that could bring better results, more satisfying experiences all the way around, and impact on cost, impact on satisfaction and confidence. And those early experiences really got me thinking about how things could be done differently. One of the things that I did, not to answer Dr. McLeod directly, but I was invited to be part of an international working group research team that was working with research from the children's perspective. And it was greatly encouraging for me to be part of having that body of work launched and actually make a difference, have impact. We were invited to present our little pioneering work at the UN Summit for Children that was launched in combination with Children's Rights for Children in 1990. But getting on to me as a patient and the patient experience and why I am such an advocate, and if you want to use the language of AbSPORU and PPAC, why I'm such an ambassador for this patient-oriented research. During supper on August the 4th, 1994, and I've never talked about this in a public position before, I think we want to present ourselves as healthy and well, and I am that. But I want you to know that I have been very close to transversing that part of life that is in the here and now and to the hereafter, or wherever that is. And it was a few people in the health system, and not always health professionals, that helped me find my way back. 1994, I had a pain attack that sent me from my supper table onto the floor writhing. And I knew what it was because I'd had little episodes before, but nothing of this particular huge impact. And a few days earlier, my husband and I had been driving along to Edmonton, and I had said to Jack, my husband, I said, I think we should talk about what if I should die. And I felt really very healthy at the point, had no idea what was just around the corner on a journey for me. And that night, I landed on the floor, just catapulted on the floor with this pain attack. My husband took me straight away to emergency, where I was told by the attending physician that I had gas. I knew what my problem was. I told her, and I told the team, in the little bit of fragmented mentality that I had left in cognition, that I had an inflamed and an ovarian cyst that was giving me some very big problems. But she insisted it was gas. And it was 1994, and for those of you who remember 1994, honestly, I felt like I was hitting every hole along the way in the reorganization of the healthcare system. And that brings me to 2015, when I was invited as a patient to join this group that was just beginning to take patient experience into the heart of research. And predating that a few years earlier, I can remember so succinctly the absolute leap of my heart and my brain when I heard the expression starting to be used in healthcare about the need for knowledge, research-based knowledge. It seemed so right. So when the invitation came to work with AbSPORU and PPAC, I thought, yay, finally, and I really jumped at the chance. I was really thrilled, amazed, and affirmed to do that. So like other Albertans and Canadians, I think we've all been patients in one way or the other. So on this job that I'm doing, it's been a little difficult at times for me to figure out just where the patient part of me needs to talk and explain, or where the health professional or the business person, professional part of me should chip in. But I think I am learning personally, and this is to encourage any of you who think that what all of these people have said is very complex, that there is a role for each of us as patients or with our own knowledge, and the big, really important thing is that we don't abdicate our own experience. We take the experience that we've had, we've learned how to modify it, share our story in ways that don't hit people in the face like a ton of bricks, or go on and on and on with the organ recital of what was wrong. And I'm just delighted that we have been able to make the kind of progress that we have made. But back to me and impact, and a little bit of progress report for you folks, what I experienced more recently. In October of this last year, that bat from hell caught me again, and I was admitted to St. Mary's Hospital in Camrose, where I am really gratified to hear that despite recurrent encounters with the health system because of this misdiagnosis and all the stuff that happened to me in 1994, I, for the first time, started to hear from some of the staff about patient-oriented research. And so I thought, wow, you know, this is really starting to work. And I didn't tell them that I was on this body of people, but I just listened and gleaned all the information I possibly could. So in my journey, where does this place, primarily within rural Alberta, lead me, and what are the results and impacts that I have been seeing in my work? Well, I want you to know that I spend a lot of time, probably in almost every encounter, I try to get it in there one way or the other, to encourage people to join the registry. And you'll learn more about the registry, right, Kiera, as we go along through this conference. And I encourage people to think about opportunities for them and their knowledge, and where they might just chink in a little bit of their own experience and knowledge. I encourage people to be more proactive, to speak up and speak out. And I encourage them to be engaged in self-directed management of their own health care. And so what have been some of the joys along this journey? The joys have been working with other committed people, seeing positive changes and success, and knowing that in Southern Alberta there is now, we learned last year at the conference, a center, a health center that was started by patients, and we're seeing patients involved in publishing some of the health-based research that they're doing. So being able to be at conferences like this, have an input to Canadian Institutes for Health Research, and as a patient, encouraging staff when I am a patient in the real patient sense, and to continue this journey to patient-oriented health research. It's a long one, and it's strewn with as many stories and episodes as there are people. It's hard. I don't find it particularly easy. I still find a lot of resistance out there, Kathy, like we were talking earlier. But I believe it's really worthwhile, and in the spirit and the words of the Indigenous people of my region with whom I work very closely, we have a word that is Wakotawin. It means working together as neighbors in a spirit of kindredness, kinshipness. And I know that as we do that, we really will get where we're going with this patient-oriented research. So all the best to each one of you on your journey, whether you're a patient or a professional or a mixture of both. Thank you.